Well, welcome everybody. Very happy morning. We have 4 speakers for you this morning. Our Provost, John Etchemendy, Dean Richard Saller, who is the Dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences, Jonathan Levin, who is the Chair of the Department of Economics, and then our winner this morning, Al Roth. So we're going to start with Provost Etchemendy. We'll conclude and have some time for questions, but Professor Roth has a class to teach this morning, so we will be cutting the remarks a little bit short. Thank you.
So good morning and welcome everyone. It's my pleasure and honor to be able to take part in the introduction of Alvin Roth, the McCaw Senior Visiting Professor of Economics here at Stanford, and the 2012 Nobel Memorial Prize winner in Economic Sciences. As you know, our timing with Al couldn't have been more fortuitous. He's just joining the Department of Economics here as a professor of economics after a wonderful, extraordinary career at Harvard. The Los Angeles Times suggested this morning that Stanford, quote, lured Al here just in time for him to become the Stanford's 19th laureate among our current community of scholars. Now, we're very proud to be sharing this honor with Harvard University, where he still holds a faculty position. But the actual story of Al's return to Stanford is a little bit more interesting. Al's decision to come here is more of a homecoming. Al earned a master's and doctorate in operations research from our engineering school. So this celebration is actually doubling as something of a welcome home party. Many of Al's graduate students are now professors here, including economist Muriel Niederle. And although I think our weather is a little bit better than Cambridge, I suspect that his colleagues and former students were a big part of the attraction. It also bears noting, as Lisa said, that Al is going to continue to teach this morning at 11 o'clock. This prize, of course, recognizes his scholarship, but I think the fact that he's going to continue and get to his class in time, in spite of all of you being here, says something about his teaching and his mentoring, and is, of course, one of the reasons that we were so anxious to get him back to Stanford. In other words, Al's accomplishments are a great source of pride at Stanford, both because he's a faculty member and because he's a graduate of the university. As provost, I had the pleasure of helping to convince Al to return to Stanford. And what I can say is that not only is Al an extraordinary researcher and teacher, admired worldwide by economists, but he's also a heck of a nice human being. So simply stated, Al uses economics and the relatively new area of market design to make a difference in people's lives. As he told Forbes magazine, quote, I look around the world and I see all kinds of interesting, important problems we ought to solve with the tools that we have. Specifically, he uses game theory to solve such real-world problems as the distribution of kidney donations and optimizing the placement of students in large urban school districts. The work that earned the Nobel is very much an application of the mathematical approach that was originally designed by his co-recipient, Lloyd Shapley. So I'm going to let Al describe his research. I'm sure he can do so better than I can, but first I want to introduce Richard Saller, the Dean of Humanities and Sciences.
Thank you, John. It is a real pleasure to welcome Al back to campus. We're always pleased to welcome an alum back, and I think Al really exemplifies some of the qualities that we at Stanford take pride in. One is cutting across different fields and schools, and as a returning faculty member, Al will have the opportunity here not only to work with his colleagues in economics, but in computer science and other parts of the university. My school, School of Humanities and Sciences, is the basic research core of the university, and as such, sometimes we're thought to be a little esoteric and not involved in real-world problems, and so it is a particular pleasure to have Al back working on such deeply practical issues as kidney transplants or matching students to schools. and to show that basic research really does have an importance in improving the world. And then finally, I'll say, we put a lot of time into developing files for the appointment of senior faculty to evaluate their quality. And when we put together Al's recruitment file, we knew this was probably the best that I had seen in 5 years as dean here. And it's nice to have the Nobel Committee vindicate our taste in this. So I'll hand it over now to Jonathan Levin, the chair of our economics department.
Thanks, Richard. I'm actually going to say a little bit about Al's research because I think it'll be easier for me to use superlatives than for Al himself. So Al, as John and Richard mentioned, he was at Stanford for his PhD dissertation, which he completed under Bob Wilson, who's a distinguished professor in the business school. Al subsequently went on and taught at Illinois, at Pittsburgh, and then at Harvard before his coming back here this year. Al followed a trajectory in his research career, which is actually not atypical for economists, which is that he started doing very abstract mathematical work. I think his first journal publication was on lattice theory, if I'm not incorrect. And he did essentially operations research. And he subsequently got interested in experimental economics, and he was one of the pioneers in starting to do laboratory experiments in economics. He worked on bargaining and on market games, and he actually did very important work in that area. He could have easily been recognized by the Nobel Committee for his experimental economics research, although they chose to recognize him for a separate body of work. But he's one of the few economists who had really made substantive contributions that could have earned him 2 Nobel Prizes and not just one. In the early 1980s, Al made a very remarkable observation, which was that he noticed, he was interested thinking about matching theory, and he noticed that the National Residency Matching Program, I think at the time it was called the National Intern Matching Program, had been using since the 1950s an algorithm to assign medical residents to hospitals. And he started looking at the details of this algorithm, and he recognized that the rules that they were using to assign the residents to the hospitals were exactly a set of rules, an algorithm that had been invented in the 1960s by 2 mathematicians, David Gale, who's now deceased, who otherwise would have shared in this Nobel Prize, who was a mathematician at Berkeley, and Lloyd Shapley at UCLA, who's the co-recipient of this year's Nobel Prize. And they had written a beautiful paper in 1962 called College Admissions and the Stability of Marriage, in which they presented a set of rules, an algorithm for assigning men to women. It's a completely abstract mathematical paper. It's actually it's a beautiful mathematical paper. It's a paper that uses no symbols or equations, but proves a very beautiful result about the possibility of making stable matchings between men and women so no one wants to run off with another partner. And could be generalized to also think about problems of assigning workers to jobs. And Al was familiar with this work because it's a famous paper in applied math, and he started looking at the intern program, and he realized that the doctors had actually invented this same algorithm 10 years before Gale and Shapley had invented it, and they were using it to assign the residents to the hospitals. And Al wrote a classic paper in 1984 that pointed this out and explained the history. And then, even more remarkable, this reoriented Al's research, and he subsequently went on to start trying to understand why was it that this market had been successful and why this rule was used. And he wrote, a few years later, he made another observation, which was that in the UK, they also used this rule, but only some of the hospitals used it. Other hospitals used a different set of rules, and the hospitals that used a different set of rules, their markets always broke down. And they had all kinds of problems with getting the residents to match to the hospitals in those markets, and the continuous problems. And the ones that used the Gale-Shapley algorithm, things worked beautifully. And Al wrote a further series of papers trying to explain why markets would sometimes break down when you didn't have stable matching rules. and why when you did have stable matching rules, markets would work effectively. And he has several classic papers from the early 1990s studying that. Subsequently, his research after he was writing these papers, these were of course in economics journals for professional economists, the residency program ran into some problems of its own because they had so many couples in the match. So that the match was not designed to handle the fact that many male and female doctors in medical school marry each other and then need to match to the same hospital. And they got Al involved to try to fix that problem, which was the match was breaking down. And Al was responsible for the redesign of the National Residency Matching Program, and did a brilliant job on that, helping to stabilize the National Residency Matching System. And in fact, one of the talks that I remember best from being in graduate school was when Al arrived at Harvard and gave just a brilliant seminar about the work he had done on the residence. It was incredibly inspiring. And that work helped pioneer the field of market design, which is being recognized now, where economists have taken ideas from game theory and applied them to practical problems. And Al has been a huge leader in this area. He subsequently went on to realize that you could apply some of the same ideas to assigning students to schools in public school systems. He's worked on the public school systems in Boston and in New York City to help the cities design algorithms to assign students to schools in a way that respects the students' choices and also priority systems that the cities have in place. He's advised many other cities on how to do this as well. In the last few years, he got involved in a problem that seems entirely different, the problem of finding kidney patients who have donors that are not compatible with them and figuring out how to have kidney donors exchange, or kidney transplant patients exchange their donors or use the kidneys of someone else's donor so that they can make swaps using a totally different theory, related but different theory, also developed by Lloyd Shapley, a different set of algorithms. And that has been really amazing work that's been a lot in the news and has brought a lot of attention to Al's work and to the good things that economics can do generally. And it's just an amazing body of work that's universally respected by economists for the ways that economic theory can be brought to bear on real-world problems. And it's one of the reasons that this is a prize that everyone who does economics will be thrilled about this award, because Al's just such a special researcher and has done such amazing work. I'm going to turn it over to Al now to talk even more about it.
I understand that Lyndon Johnson, after an effusive introduction, once said that he was sorry that his parents weren't alive to hear it, because his dad would have enjoyed it and his mom would have believed it. Thank you. Emily and I were surprised this morning when we were awakened. It's a great honor, of course. Economics and science generally aren't done by individuals. They're done by large teams of people. I see lots of young economics students in the audience here. That's a good sign. It means the economics is thriving. Economics has somehow a reputation among some parts of the public as being boring, about being about prices and statistics. But I've always thought of economics as being not just part of the social sciences, but part of the humanities, because it gives us a window into people's lives at some of the biggest crossing points when they get into schools and universities, when they get jobs, when they choose careers, when they get married. These are all matching markets. They're markets where you can't just choose what you want, but you also have to be chosen. You can't just choose to go to Stanford. You have to be admitted, and Stanford can't just choose who comes to Stanford. They have to compete with Harvard and other universities. So lots of the things that we get in life come from choices, not just that we make, but that others make as well. And that's what people who study matching, my colleagues and I, are studying. And market design more generally is about how we can make marketplaces work better, how we can fix them when they're broken and develop new ones when they don't exist. And Stanford is a big center of that. Along with matching markets, another big part of market design is auction theory. And Stanford has, for a long time, been the center of that part of auction design. And in recent years, it's also become a center of matching theory with many of my former students from Harvard who will now be my colleagues here. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for coming.
Questions?
Talk about the phone call this morning that came in very early this morning, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, it was at 3:30, I think. It was dark out. It was unexpected. We didn't reach the phone in time, but they called back.
Questions?
The prize money, $1.2 million that you'll split, any plans for that?
Not yet. Well, you know, the people who call you up from Sweden spend a good deal of their effort convincing you that it's not a prank call. So there were some people who were on the call. I think I talked to 5 or 6 people, and several of them I knew. So I think that was part of their idea of how, apparently they sometimes have trouble convincing people. So I don't think I thought that it was a prank, but I was impressed that they thought I might.
How do you feel right now? You know, you just got the standing ovation. And,
Well, I
that's the
feel
first
very
part.
good. You know, it's nice. It's nice to be the object of attention, but I also would like to deflect some of that attention to all of my colleagues who work in this area. You know, someone who wins a prize is really a representative of a whole stream of work, and market design and experimental economics, these have become important parts of economics during my professional career. That's a great thing. It wasn't unimaginable. You know, the Stanford press office has been very proactive, so I got lots of emails from them in the previous week that made it hard to not think a little about. But it was certainly unexpected. I didn't think that I was going to get a call this morning.
You sort of have the world stage at this point. Any messages that you'd like to send in terms of economics and the work that you do while you have the world's attention?
Well, economics is a much broader subject than its public image would indicate. We're not just macroeconomists who try to think about aggregate levels of employment and money. We're also microeconomists who try to think about the details of how things work. And the questions of you know, who gets what and how to allocate scarce resources are important questions. They're at the interface of economics and a lot of other subjects. Certainly for students thinking about studying things, economics is a wonderful subject to study. That's a message I'd be happy to get out.
For the lay public, a lot of people are familiar with algorithms as a result of Google's search engine, but a lot of people are not familiar with what you've been doing, applying it for medical residency assignments and for school assignments. Can you give us a very lay explanation of how it works, why it works better, and how you've improved it?
Well, I can tell you, let me tell you something about school choice. Before we, so one of the very, very able school districts that we've worked with is Boston Public Schools, where they're a very high-performing school district, and it's nice to know that, it's nice to know them and to have worked with them. But they had an algorithm before we started to work with them that they asked parents to rank order lists the schools they wanted to go to, and then they tried to give as many people their first choice as possible, and after they'd done that, they tried to give as many of the remaining people their second choice as possible. And so that's a very simple and benign algorithm, but it had a bad consequence, which is that it made it unsafe for parents to tell the school system which schools they really liked. Because if you didn't get your first choice, if you didn't get the school you listed as your first choice, then there's a good chance that the school you listed as your second choice would already be full of students who had listed it as their first choice. And the school you listed as your third choice would be full of people who listed it as first and second. So you had to play very strategically. You had to think not just about what schools you liked, but what was your chance of getting them. But now, building on the work of Lloyd Shapley, who I'm sharing the prize with, now Boston has an algorithm that makes it safe for parents to tell the school system their preferences. So instead of having to think about how likely they are to get in, they can start to think about things like which kindergarten teachers are good with shy boys or whatever it is that concerns them as a family. And so I think that that levels the playing field. It makes it easier for all sorts of families to participate properly in the school system, in the school choice system. Now, fixing the school choice system in that way doesn't fix the problem of supplying enough school places, close to homes that people want to go to. The scarcity doesn't go away because we allocate scarce places more intelligently. But while we're waiting for the scarcity to go away and for all school places to be equally good, assigning them efficiently and using the reliable information that parents give us about where they would like their children to go is something that we can do with algorithms that process those preferences and turn them into school assignments.
Can you talk a little bit about the kidney matching program and also what you're currently working on?
Well, kidneys is one of the things I'm currently working on. A lot of people are surprised that economists are associated with kidney exchange, but the word exchange is the giveaway. So it turns out that you all have two kidneys, and if you're as healthy as you look, you could donate a kidney to someone you love who needed one to stay alive. But there's a big shortage of kidneys. There are over 90,000 people on the waiting list for deceased donor kidneys, so being able to better utilize live donor kidneys is a good thing. Even if you're healthy enough to give a kidney, you might not be able to give a kidney to the person you love because there are issues of compatibility between patients and donors. So if you're incompatible, you can't give a kidney to the patient you love, but you're healthy enough to give a kidney, you could give a kidney to someone else's patient, and your patient could get a kidney from their donor, and that's an exchange. And so exchange is what economists are good at. So the question is how to organize exchange. And this happens to be a market where you can't use money. Markets aren't defined by whether money is used or not, particularly matching markets. It's against the law in the United States and in much of the world to pay money for transplant kidneys, but we can help our surgical colleagues, organize what you could call barter on a large scale to make transplants possible. I should maybe make it clear that market design is a sort of a helping profession, right? We're always helping colleagues who aren't economists, but helping them do the things they're trying to do. So we always need champions in the application, right? We need to find innovative surgeons to work with for kidney exchange. We need to find dedicated public servants to work with in school choice. And one of the pleasures of being a market designer is finding just how often you can find really talented people in the kinds of places that we're in a position to help them organize a new kind of marketplace.
So we've heard some speculation on this, but really, why Stanford?
Well, to the opportunity to be a colleague with my students, that's going to be really something. The weather's good, too.
Okay. Last question.
Quick follow-up question. I understand that a growing area of application for your matching programs or your algorithm is in the employment area. What about, do algorithms trump sometimes hunches or just visceral feelings about applicants and matching them to prospective employers?
What the algorithms do is they help organize and process people's preferences, but the things that go into those preferences we often have very little to say about that, and that's where hunches come in, who you think would be a good employee, who thinks he would be a good employer. Those are mysteries into which our tools don't let us peer very well. And, you know, some of our cognate social sciences. And, you know, one of the nice things about economics is it's very open to input from other kinds of social sciences. In my professional career, we've seen a lot of mathematics enter economics, but we've also seen a lot of psychology enter economics. And we have, you know, we're big fans of the work that our colleagues in sociology do. Social sciences are social. There's lots of work to be done and plenty of room to share it among different avenues of investigation.
Thank you all very, very much, and congratulations, Professor Roth.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.